Hello and welcome. Today we are diving into a really fascinating puzzle, one that might be sitting on your bookshelf right now. Why aren't all Bibles the same? It's a story that's all about language, history, and how the very order of a library can totally change the story it tells.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Have you ever picked up a Bible at a friend's house or in a hotel room and you flip to the table of contents and think, wait a minute, this looks different? Maybe the books are in a different order or, maybe there are just more of them? Well, I can tell you it's not a misprint. It's actually a clue to a super deep and compelling history.
So, at the very heart of this mystery are the different endings. Take a look. The Jewish Tanakh ends at the book of 2 Chronicles, but most Christian Old Testaments, they end with the prophet Malachi. Now, they've got pretty much the same books inside, so why the different final word? And more importantly, what does that mean for the story each version is trying to tell?
To solve this, we've got to go way back to the beginning. The best way to think about it is like a tale of two different libraries. They both have the same core collection of sacred scrolls, but they arrange them according to two totally different blueprints.
Our story starts with the foundational collection of Hebrew scriptures, the library known as the Tanakh. This is ground zero. It's the original blueprint, the ancient collection that every other version we're talking about today comes from.
Now, the Tanakh isn't just a random list of books. It's this beautifully organized three-part structure. First up, you've got the Torah. That's the 5 books of Moses. Think of this as the foundation, the core instruction. Then comes the Nevi'im, which means the prophets. This section is like a long, ongoing conversation about Israel's history and its relationship with God. And finally, you have the Ketuvim, or the writings. This is a collection of amazing poetry, wisdom, and reflections on how to live out that relationship in the real world.
And here's a cool little detail. The name itself tells you the story. Tanakh is actually an acronym. The T stands for Torah, the N for Nevi'im, and the K for Ketuvim. See? The whole structure is baked right into the name. It's a statement about how to even approach this library of texts. So for centuries, this 3-part Hebrew structure was the standard. But then, a huge historical event happened that introduced a major twist, a translation project that would literally reshape the Bible for billions of people. So picture this. It's around the 3rd century BCE. A lot of Jewish people are living outside of Judea, and their main language is Greek, not Hebrew. So in the incredible city of Alexandria, Egypt, scholars took on this massive project. They decided to translate all the sacred Hebrew scriptures into Greek, and this famous translation was called the Septuagint.
But here's the kicker. The translators didn't just change the words, they changed the order. They were influenced by the Greek love for organizing things systematically. So instead of that theological 3-part structure, they rearranged all the scrolls by topic or genre, kind of like how a modern bookstore is organized.
This one change created a completely new blueprint. The Tanakh's 3-part structure, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, became a 4-part library organized by genre, law, then history, then poetry and wisdom, and finally, prophecy. And it was this new topical arrangement that the early Christian church adopted, and it became the model for what we now know as the Christian Old Testament.
But rearranging the books wasn't the only change. The Septuagint also introduced a brand new mystery, the case of the extra books.
And this brings us to a question that, a lot of people have wondered about. If you open a Catholic or an Orthodox Bible, you're going to find more books in their Old Testament than you will in a Protestant one. So what's up with that?
And the difference is pretty significant. Protestant Bibles have 39 books in their Old Testament, Catholic Bibles have 46, and some Orthodox traditions, like the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, have an even bigger collection, with around 54 books.
Well, the reason goes all the way back to that Greek Septuagint. It included several writings, books like Tobit, Judith, and 1st and 2nd Maccabees, that were really popular and widely read by Jewish people at the time. But they weren't ultimately included in the final official Hebrew Tanakh. But because the early church used the Greek translation, these books became a part of their scriptures.
So the crucial moment comes during the Protestant Reformation in the 1500s. Leaders like Martin Luther wanted to go back to the sources. For the Old Testament, that meant going back to the original Hebrew list of books. Now, the book count is different. The Tanakh has 24 books and the Protestant Old Testament has 39, but the actual content is exactly the same. It's just divided up differently. So the Reformers kept that original list and moved those extra books from the Septuagint into a separate section they called the Apocrypha, while Catholic and Orthodox traditions just kept the larger collection they'd been using all along.
Okay, this brings us to the most important question of all. We've seen what changed and why it changed, but what difference does it actually make?
I mean, why does the order of a library matter so much?
Well, think about any great series of books or movies you love. That final installment, it leaves you with a lasting impression, right? It frames how you think about the entire story. It's the exact same thing with a collection of sacred texts. The final book sets the tone for what you're supposed to expect next.
And the impact of this one structural change is absolutely profound. The Tanakh ends with 2 Chronicles, which finishes with the king of Persia telling the Jewish exiles, go home, rebuild God's temple. It's an open-ended story of hope and getting back to work. By contrast, the Christian Old Testament moves the prophets to the end, concluding with Malachi's promise that Elijah will return before a final day of the Lord. This creates a powerful feeling of waiting. It's a story that feels unfinished, pointing forward, waiting for the New Testament to begin.
It all comes down to the simple but incredibly powerful idea. Placement shapes expectation. The structure itself teaches you how to read. It's not just a table of contents, it's a narrative guide. One blueprint creates a story about returning home to rebuild, and the other creates a story about waiting for a new hero to arrive.
So what's the big takeaway for us from this ancient story about organizing a library? It's that how you organize information fundamentally changes its meaning. And that's a lesson that applies to so much more than just ancient texts. It's about trying to understand the why behind any different perspective we run into.
Look, both the Jewish and Christian communities treasure these sacred texts. They simply organize them in different ways to highlight what was most central to their story. Neither blueprint is wrong, they just have different narrative goals. And that's such a powerful reminder that there's often more than one valid way to arrange the facts to find meaning.
And this brings us to this week's challenge. In the Jewish tradition, there's a practice called Dan Lekef Sakut. It means judging others favorably. So the next time you notice someone has a totally different opinion or way of doing things, just pause. Instead of jumping to the conclusion that they're wrong, get curious. Ask them, hey, can you help me understand why you see it that way? Try to understand their blueprint. What are their foundational beliefs, their Torah? What life events, their Nevi'im, shape their view? And what personal reflections, their Keruvim, inform their wisdom? Getting curious about their story is the first step to true understanding.
When you really try to understand someone's internal library, how they arrange their facts and their values, you don't just learn about them, you gain a whole new perspective on the world and maybe, just maybe, a new way to organize your own story.
Thank you for joining us for this complete journey through the Pardes. We hope these ancient truths help you and your family improve your own dimensions this week. If you enjoyed this full chapter deep dive, please like, subscribe, and share which part of the journey touched your soul in the comments. We'll see you in the next chapter.